6 months after burying my husband, I still called his cell phone every single night just to hear his voicemail. I know how that sounds. Desperate, unhinged, pathetic, maybe. But when you've shared 16 years of your life with someone, when your entire adult identity has been built around the rhythm of his footsteps in the hallway and the way he cleared his throat before saying something serious, silence becomes unbearable. His voicemail said, "Hey, it's Michael. Make it good." That half laugh in his voice at the end, that tiny breath before he hung up. I memorized it. I clung to it like oxygen. The phone company had made an administrative error and never disconnected the line. Everyone said it was paperwork incompetence. I chose to believe it was mercy. A small crack in the universe that allowed me to hear him one more time every night at exactly 9:43 p.m., the precise minute the police report said he died. October 20th, 9:43 p.m. Commercial delivery van, intersection of Oak Street and 2nd Avenue. Instantaneous. That word still makes my stomach twist. Instantaneous. As if that makes it easier. As if love disappears on impact. Last Wednesday, on the second ring, someone answered. Not similar, not reminiscent, not close. It was his voice. Exactly his. "Emily," he whispered urgently, "listen very carefully. I'm not dead." The wine glass slipped from my hand and shattered across the kitchen tile. Red spread across white like a wound opening. My legs went numb. I didn't scream. I didn't breathe. Because grief can make you hallucinate. But hallucinations don't remember private jokes. They don't know the name of the stray cat you argued about behind the Thai restaurant 16 years ago. They don't know the exact place where you first said, "I love you." Dead men don't give instructions. And yet, he did. I didn't know then that the world I thought I understood was about to split in half. My name is Emily Hayes. I'm 38 years old. Until 6 months ago, my life was painfully ordinary in the most beautiful way. I worked as a financial compliance analyst for a regional firm. Long hours, spreadsheets, quiet precision. I've always been the observant one, the detail-oriented one, the woman who double-checks everything before signing her name. Michael used to tease me about it. "You'd audit our grocery list if you could," he'd laugh, leaning against the kitchen counter while I compared receipts. "And you'd overspend on gourmet cheese if I didn't," I'd shoot back. We met when I was 22 and he was 23. It was raining outside a used bookstore downtown. He held the door open for me and made some ridiculous joke about how romance novels were secretly more dangerous than horror fiction. I rolled my eyes. He followed me into the history section anyway. Our first real date wasn't glamorous. Burgers. Too much mustard. We talked for 4 hours. By the 4th date, we'd driven out to an abandoned amusement park on the edge of town just to watch the sunset from the rusted Ferris wheel platform. The place was eerie and quiet, wind pushing against metal that hadn't moved in years. "I love you," he blurted suddenly, like he'd tripped over the words. I froze, then laughed. "Thank God," I said. I'd been dying to say it first. Nobody else ever knew about that place. It was ours, sacred. We married 2 years later. At the courthouse, when the judge asked if he took me to be his lawfully wedded wife, he didn't say, "I do." He said, 100% absolutely. The entire room laughed. I cried. He worked as an independent auto mechanic, brilliant with engines, gentle with people. He had this calm steadiness about him, like nothing could truly shake him. We built a life out of routines. Sunday pancakes, movie nights on Fridays, quiet evenings where he'd tinker in the garage while I read on the porch. Our golden retriever, Charlie, who waited by the door every day at 5:30 for him to come home. His mother passed when he was young. His father, Roger Blackwood, raised him alone. Roger was stern but proud. At least, that's what I believed. He walked Michael down the aisle at our wedding with tears in his eyes. He showed up to every holiday dinner, taught Michael how to fish, treated me politely, Never warm, but never cruel. Looking back, there were small things. Roger asking too many questions about Michael's work, about my job, about finances, about who we talked to. I dismissed it as parental curiosity. The night of the crash was a Tuesday. Michael had been meeting a supplier across town about a parts contract. He kissed my forehead before leaving. "If I'm not home by 10, assume I finally ran off to join a biker gang," he joked. Those were his last words to me. The police knocked at 11:57 p.m. 2 officers, carefully rehearsed voices. Instantaneous, no suffering. Roger identified the body at the morgue. They wouldn't let me see him. Too catastrophic, they said. Better to remember him as he was. I believed them. I buried my husband without seeing his face. That is the kind of trust grief forces on you. 6 months of waking up reaching for him. 6 months of cooking for 2 and throwing half away. 6 months of calling his phone every night at 9:43 p.m. just to hear, "Hey, it's Michael. Make it good." And then last Wednesday, he answered. When Michael's voice said my name that night, something inside me cracked open. But something else locked into place. Because grief makes you fragile. But love makes you recognize what's real. After the call ended abruptly, I stood in the kitchen shaking, staring at my reflection in the dark window. My heart was pounding so violently I could feel it in my teeth. I called my younger sister, Lisa. "Emily, it's almost midnight," she mumbled. He answered. Silence. "Who?" "Michael." Another silence. This one longer, heavier. She arrived 20 minutes later in sweatpants and sneakers, hair thrown into a messy bun. She found me on the kitchen floor, red wine still staining the grout between the tiles. "You saw him at the funeral home," she said carefully while helping me up. "Roger identified him. The coroner confirmed everything. This is grief doing cruel things." But I wasn't hysterical. I wasn't rambling. "He knew about Muffin," I whispered. Lisa frowned. "Who?" "Exactly. The stray cat we'd found behind the Thai restaurant on 5th Street during our first year of marriage. We'd argued for an hour over whether to name her Muffin or Dumpling before giving her to Mrs. Chen when our apartment banned pets. We never told anyone that story. And then the voice on the phone had reminded me of something even more private. Our first serious fight. Michael had forgotten my birthday the year he was nervous about meeting my father. He showed up late with grocery store carnations and a Twix bar because it was the only candy left at checkout. I'd laughed until I cried. No one knew that either. Lisa sat across from me at the table, fingers wrapped tightly around her mug. What exactly did the voice say? He told me to meet him tomorrow, noon, our place. Her face drained of color. The amusement park? I nodded. We'd never posted pictures there, never mentioned it online, never taken friends. It was the first place we said, "I love you." Nobody knew, or at least nobody should have. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I spread the accident report across the dining table like I was back at work auditing numbers. I read every line slowly. Delivery van driver, Carlos Martinez. Blood alcohol level, 3 times legal limit. Vehicle damage, catastrophic. Brake malfunction noted as contributing factor. I paused. Brake malfunction? I had read this report dozens of times in the early weeks after the crash, but grief is a fog. It blurs things. Michael maintained his own vehicles meticulously. He rotated tires early, changed brake pads before they squeaked. 3 days before the crash, he told me proudly, everything's running smooth. So why would the report mention brake system failure? And then something else resurfaced. The wedding band. Michael's platinum ring with the small square-cut emerald inset, my anniversary gift to him 5 years ago. He never took it off, not even when working in the garage. The report stated, ring not recovered from scene, presumed lost in wreckage. But I remembered something vividly. 6 years earlier, after he'd broken his finger in a minor accident, the ring had nearly needed to be cut off due to swelling. We joked that they'd have to bury him with it someday because it wasn't coming off otherwise. If the impact was catastrophic enough to remove it, where was it? At 3:12 a.m., I pulled out our photo albums. Every picture from the past year. There it was. That platinum band. That emerald catching the light. I pressed my hand against my mouth. The voice had said, "I'm not dead." Logic told me it was impossible. My training told me something didn't fit. My heart told me he was alive. By morning, I had called in sick to work for the first time in 6 years. When my boss asked if I needed time, I almost laughed. Time wasn't the problem. Truth was, and I was about to go looking for it. I arrived at the abandoned amusement park at 11:47 a.m. The sky was gray, low and heavy, like it was pressing down on the rusted metal structures. The Ferris wheel stood frozen against the clouds, skeletal and silent. Wind pushed through weeds that had swallowed the pavement years ago. My hands were trembling, but my mind was razor sharp. If this was a cruel prank, I would expose it. If someone was exploiting my husband's death, they picked the wrong woman. At exactly 12 p.m., I saw movement near the old ticket booth. A figure in a dark hoodie, slight limp, favoring the right leg. My breath caught. Michael had torn a ligament in his right knee skiing 12 years ago. On cold days, there was always the faintest hesitation in his step. Most people never noticed it. I did. "Emily," the voice called out softly. "Don't come any closer yet." My throat closed. It was him. Not similar, not close. Him. "Show me your face," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. The figure hesitated, then slowly pulled back the hood. The world tilted. It was Michael. Scar tissue ran from his temple to his jaw. His dark hair had been cut shorter than he'd ever worn it. He looked thinner, harder. But his eyes, those deep hazel eyes that warmed when he smiled, were the same. I staggered back a step. "You're dead," I whispered. "I know what you were told," his voice cracked. "But I survived." I felt like I was outside my body watching this happen. "The accident," I said. "Roger identified it wasn't an accident." The words landed like a physical blow. He stepped forward slowly, hands visible, as if approaching a frightened animal. "I found something at work," he said. "Documents hidden inside a client file. The Riverside Foundation. They've been laundering money through city infrastructure contracts for years. Fake repairs, inflated invoices, shell companies." I blinked, trying to process. "You're a mechanic," I said faintly. "Yes, and I started noticing patterns. The same fleet vehicles coming in for repairs that never needed fixing. Parts swapped out that were brand new. I copied invoices, took photos. My heart pounded violently. Someone found out," he continued. "The van driver wasn't drunk. He was paid." "No." I shook my head automatically. "The toxicology falsified." My lungs felt too small. A woman named Fatima pulled me from the wreck before police arrived. She was driving behind the van. She saw him accelerate into me deliberately. She saw him brace for impact. I could barely breathe. "The body at the morgue?" I forced out. His face twisted. "There was another victim that night. A homeless man, similar build. They burned parts of the body beyond recognition. Roger was in shock. They told him it was me." My knees nearly buckled. "You let me bury someone else?" I whispered. "They threatened you," he said fiercely. "One of them leaned into the wreckage and told me if I survived, you'd be next. They'd make it look like suicide, a grieving widow who couldn't cope." My stomach turned. "Fatima convinced me staying legally dead was the only way to protect you." Tears blurred my vision. 6 months. 6 months of funerals and empty beds and calling his voicemail every night. "I heard your messages," he said quietly. Fatima rerouted the number so I could listen. My chest shattered. "You knew?" "Every night at 9:43. His voice broke. "Emily, I wanted to come back so many times." Then engines roared in the distance. We both turned. 3 black SUVs tore down the access road toward the park. "They tracked your phone," he said sharply. "We have to move." Before I could argue, he grabbed my hand. His skin was warm, solid, real. We ran. Branches whipped against my arms as we crashed through brush behind the park. My heart was slamming in my chest, but adrenaline drowned out everything else. Behind us, doors slammed. Voices shouted. "Emily," he gasped as we ran. "There's more." "This isn't enough?" I snapped breathlessly. He didn't answer immediately. Then he said the words that fractured everything I thought I knew. "Roger isn't my biological father." I stumbled. "What?" My real parents were investigative journalists. They were looking into Riverside 30 years ago. Their car accident wasn't an accident either. Roger was planted to raise me, to monitor me. The air left my lungs completely. Roger, the man who held my hand at the funeral, who cried, who told me I'd always be his daughter. The SUVs were closing in. Michael pulled me toward a narrow service road. An old sedan waited there. He shoved me into the passenger seat and floored the accelerator, just as the first SUV burst from the trees behind us. My old life, the grief, the mourning, the cemetery visits, collapsed behind me in a cloud of dust. My husband wasn't dead. He had been hunted. And now, so were we. The car sped down the narrow road, gravel spitting against the undercarriage. I couldn't stop staring at him. His hands on the steering wheel, the faint scar along his jaw, the way his right thumb tapped twice when he was thinking. For 6 months, I had memorized his absence. Now I had to process his presence. "Say something," he muttered, eyes locked on the rearview mirror. I swallowed. My throat felt raw. "You let me bury a stranger." The words came out flat, controlled, not hysterical. That scared me more. His jaw tightened. I didn't have a choice. You always have a choice. Not when they're threatening your wife. That hit harder than I expected. My body shook, not from fear, but from the collision of emotions. Relief, rage, love, betrayal. "You listen to me grieve," I whispered, "every night." "Yes." His grip on the steering wheel tightened until his knuckles went white. "I know." "Then how did you not come back?" Silence filled the car, heavy and suffocating. "They showed me footage," he said finally. "Photos of you, leaving work, walking Charlie, going to the grocery store. They wanted me to understand how easy it would be." My stomach dropped. This wasn't just conspiracy. It was surveillance. I leaned back against the seat, trying to steady my breathing. Part of me wanted to scream at him. Part of me wanted to climb across the console and hold him so tightly neither of us could breathe. Instead, I asked the only question that mattered. "Do you trust me?" He glanced at me, startled. "Of course I do." "Then you don't get to decide what risks I take for my own life." The words surprised even me. For 6 months, I had been a widow, fragile, pitied, handled carefully by everyone around me. But I wasn't fragile. I was grieving. There's a difference. "I would have chosen to know," I continued. "I would have chosen to fight with you." His voice dropped. "I was trying to protect you." I don't need protecting from the truth. The SUVs were no longer visible, but that didn't mean we were safe. "Where is Fatima?" I asked. "Safe house, about 45 miles north." "And you trust her?" "With my life." I studied his profile. He looked older, hardened, like 6 months of hiding had carved something sharper into him. "Did you ever doubt me?" I asked quietly. His head snapped toward me. "Never." "Not once?" "Not once." I exhaled slowly, because there had been nights, dark, ugly nights, when I had doubted him, when I wondered if maybe there had been something I missed, a secret, another woman, a reason he'd been distracted that final week. Grief makes you question everything, even love. But hearing his certainty steadied something inside me. We drove in silence for several minutes before I asked the question I'd been avoiding. "What happens now?" He hesitated. "Now, we disappear." Disappear. I pictured Lisa, Charlie, my office, the house with the crooked mailbox. My voice wavered for the first time. "Everyone thinks you're dead. And they'll have to think that for a little longer. And me?" He looked at me then, fully. "You have a choice." That stopped me. If you want to go back, he said carefully, I won't stop you. I won't drag you into this. I stared at him. Go back, I repeated. To what? To an empty bed and a headstone? His eyes softened. I already buried you once, I said quietly. I'm not doing it again. Emotion flickered across his face. Relief mixed with something deeper. Gratitude. But beneath that, fear. Because this wasn't over. Not even close. As we merged onto the highway heading north, I felt something shift inside me. 6 months ago, I was a woman shattered by loss. Now I was a woman running from people powerful enough to fake deaths and manipulate police reports. And somehow, I wasn't the most afraid I'd ever been. The most afraid I'd ever been was standing in front of a casket, believing the love of my life was inside it. This was different. This was war. We reached the safe house just before dusk. It wasn't dramatic, no high fences, no armed guards, just a modest cabin tucked deep into dense woodland, far from highways and satellite views. The kind of place no one would look twice at. Fatima opened the door before we knocked. She was in her early 40s, sharp-eyed, steady, the kind of woman who assessed a room in half a second. So you brought her, she said calmly, looking at me. Not unkindly, just factual. You didn't think I would, Michael replied. Her gaze shifted to him, then back to me. You understand what this means? She asked. I buried my husband, I said evenly. I can handle the truth. That earned a small nod. Inside, the cabin smelled faintly of wood smoke and something herbal. A laptop sat open on the table. Documents were spread out in meticulous rows. Fatima didn't waste time. They've escalated, she said. 4 mechanics connected to Riverside contracts have had accidents in the past 6 weeks. My pulse spiked. Accidents? Brake failures, electrical fires, one supposed robbery gone wrong. I looked at Michael. His jaw tightened. They're cleaning house, Fatima continued. Anyone who might have noticed inconsistencies. The room felt smaller suddenly. They'll come for you again, she said to him. And now they'll assume she knows, too. I stepped forward. I do. Michael shot me a warning look, but I ignored it. I need to see everything, I said. Fatima slid a flash drive across the table. Invoices, audio recordings, surveillance photos, names. Names. One of them stopped my breathing. Roger Blackwood, financial trustee. Riverside Foundation. My father-in-law. I felt like I'd swallowed ice. That's impossible, I whispered. It's not, Fatima said quietly. He's been on their board for 22 years. Memories began rearranging themselves in my mind. Roger asking Michael detailed questions about contracts. Roger insisting on handling funeral arrangements personally. Roger not letting me see the body. My stomach twisted violently. He cried, I said faintly, at the funeral. People can cry and still lie, Fatima replied. Michael looked at me carefully. I held up a hand. I needed a second. Grief had hollowed me out for 6 months. Now betrayal was filling the space. I want to call him, I said suddenly. Both of them stiffened. No, Michael said immediately. Why? Because if he's involved, he's not just a father-in-law. He's an operative. The word chilled me, but anger was rising fast. He held my hand, I said, voice shaking. He told me to be strong. He told me Michael died instantly. Fatima's tone softened slightly. Emily, they stage everything. They control the narrative before anyone thinks to question it. I looked down at the table again. Line item after line item. Shell corporations. Municipal construction contracts. Mechanical maintenance payments routed through fake repair shops. Michael's shop had unknowingly been part of the pattern. They used your garage as cover, I said slowly. Yes. And when you noticed, they removed the variable. My chest tightened. There was a knock at the cabin door. All 3 of us froze. Fatima moved first, silent and efficient, checking the small external monitor mounted beside the window. Supply drop, she said after a second. She stepped outside briefly and returned with a sealed box. New IDs, she said calmly. Prepared in case he insisted on contacting you. She looked at Michael. And he did. He didn't apologize. He just said, I couldn't listen to her grieve anymore. My heart clenched painfully. Fatima opened the box. Passports, driver's licenses, birth certificates, new names. I picked up the passport. Emma Richardson. I stared at the photograph. It was me, but not me. Different hair color, different expression. You'll need to alter your appearance, Fatima said. Both of you. And then what? I asked. Then we send the data anonymously to federal authorities and major news outlets, simultaneously, multiple encrypted channels. Michael exhaled. That will bring heat. Yes, she said, but not just on you. She met my eyes directly. It will expose them. For the first time since this began, something inside me aligned. I wasn't just running anymore. I was choosing a side. But escalation has a cost, and the cost came that night. At 2:17 a.m., my phone buzzed. A text message. Unknown number. You should have stayed grieving. My blood ran cold. A second message followed. Widows are easier to manage than fighters. Michael was awake instantly. What? I showed him the screen. His face went white. They know, he whispered. The third message arrived. A photo of our house, taken that evening, lights on. Lisa's car in the driveway. My knees nearly gave out. They'll hurt her, I choked. Michael grabbed his phone immediately. Fatima was already moving. No calls. They'll be monitoring. That's my sister, I snapped. And that's exactly why they sent it, she shot back. To destabilize you. My hands were shaking uncontrollably now. This wasn't just about us anymore. They were pushing, escalating, testing how far we would go. And in that moment, something hardened inside me completely. If they thought grief had made me weak, they had no idea what they'd created. I didn't sleep at all that night, not because of fear for myself, because of Lisa. The image of her car sitting innocently in my driveway replayed in my mind over and over again. The yellow porch light glowing, the curtains half drawn. She had moved in for 3 weeks after the funeral, just to make sure I ate, just to make sure I didn't disappear into myself. And now they had her address. They won't hurt her, Michael said quietly from across the cabin table as dawn began to thin the darkness. You don't know that. They're strategic. They escalate pressure. They don't act impulsively. That's supposed to make me feel better? My voice cracked despite my effort to stay composed. He stood and crossed the room, kneeling in front of me. Emily, he said softly. If they wanted her gone, they wouldn't warn us. That logic was cold, calculated, and probably true. But logic doesn't calm the part of you that loves someone. I buried you, I whispered. I stood next to a casket and believed I was alone in the world. His hand moved toward mine, hesitant. I know. No, I shook my head. You don't. My voice trembled, not from anger this time, but from exhaustion. I learned how to breathe without you. Do you understand what that costs? He went still. For 6 months, I rewired my entire existence around your absence. I folded your clothes into boxes. I let Lisa take Charlie because I couldn't look at him waiting by the door anymore. I signed insurance documents. I canceled joint accounts. The words spilled out faster now. I stood in front of people who pitied me, who whispered about how young I was to be a widow. I forced myself to survive. Tears blurred everything. And now you're back, I said, voice breaking. And I don't know how to hold both realities at once. Silence settled between us. Not hostile, just raw. He rested his forehead gently against my knee, the way he used to when apologizing without words. I never stopped being yours, he said quietly. That almost broke me completely, because I never stopped being his either. But love doesn't erase trauma. Outside, snow began falling lightly, the first of the season. The cabin felt smaller by the hour. We couldn't call anyone, couldn't reassure Lisa, couldn't explain anything. To protect her, she had to believe I was still the grieving widow who went home alone every night. That isolation pressed in from all sides. At one point, I found myself standing alone in the bathroom, gripping the sink so tightly my knuckles turned white. What if this is another lie? A voice in my head whispered. What if this was stage 2? What if the man sitting in the other room wasn't truly Michael? Trauma plants doubt like weeds. I walked back out slowly. He was sitting at the table, staring at the fire, profile illuminated by flickering light. He looked up when I entered. That small half smile, the one that used to undo me, and I knew. No one could fake 16 years of micro-expressions. No one could replicate the rhythm of his breathing when he was anxious, the way his left eyebrow twitched slightly before he argued a point. He was real, which meant the danger was real too. At noon, Fatima returned from a supply run. Her expression was tighter than usual. "They're running media control," she said. "Local news just aired a segment about a recent brake failure accident, framing it as isolated negligence." "They're getting ahead of exposure," Michael said. "Yes." She paused, then added quietly, "And Roger was interviewed." The air left my lungs. "What did he say?" I asked. "That he lost his son 6 months ago to reckless driving. That he hopes no other family has to endure such tragedy." I sank into the chair. He was grieving publicly, performing. My chest hollowed out again. "He played father for decades," Fatima said softly. "He's very good at performance." The lowest moment didn't come with shouting. It came with realization. We couldn't go back. We couldn't mourn the people we loved. We couldn't reveal ourselves without risking their lives. I had lost my old life twice now. First to death, then to truth. And sitting there in that quiet cabin, watching snowfall outside a window that wasn't mine, I felt something close to despair. Not because we were hunted, but because even if we survived, everything we'd built was already gone. Michael reached across the table slowly. "I would give up everything," he said, voice steady, "if it meant you were safe." I looked at him. "We already have," I whispered. And for the first time since that phone call, the weight of what we'd sacrificed pressed down so hard I could barely breathe. The breaking point didn't come from fear. It came from clarity. 3 days after the threatening messages, Fatima returned with something different in her expression. Controlled urgency. "They've made a mistake," she said. Michael straightened instantly. "What kind of mistake?" "The kind arrogant people make when they think they've already won." She plugged a secure drive into the laptop and rotated the screen toward us. Surveillance footage. A private parking garage. Roger Blackwood stepping out of a black SUV. Calm. Composed. He shook hands with a man in a gray suit, one of the Riverside executives listed in the documents. Timestamp. 1 week before the crash. I felt the blood drain from my face. "He knew," I whispered. "More than that," Fatima said quietly. Audio picked up partial conversation. She clicked another file. Static. Echo. Then Roger's voice, clear enough to recognize instantly. "It has to look clean. Brake system failure makes sense. He's been working too much. It's believable." My stomach turned violently. Michael didn't move. Didn't breathe. "He didn't just know," Fatima said. "He approved it." The room went silent, except for the faint hum of the laptop fan. For months, I had pictured Roger as a grieving father, a broken man who lost his only son. Now I saw him clearly. An architect of destruction. Michael closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, something had changed. Resolve. "They wanted to eliminate loose ends," he said slowly. "They miscalculated one thing, me." I leaned forward, heart steady now, in a way it hadn't been since this began. "They think we're still reacting," I said, "still scrambling." Fatima gave a faint nod, which gives us leverage. "What do we have?" I asked. "Evidence strong enough to trigger federal jurisdiction," she replied. "Financial trails crossing state lines, murder conspiracy, corrupt law enforcement." Michael looked at me carefully. "This will burn everything down," he said. I met his eyes. "They burned us first." This wasn't about revenge. It was about stopping them before more accidents happened, before another spouse buried the wrong body. Fatima outlined the plan. Simultaneous encrypted submissions to 8 major national news outlets, the FBI Financial Crimes Division, 2 independent investigative journalists with reputations for exposing political corruption, all within the same 30-second window. "They can silence one," she said. They can't silence 10. My pulse was steady now, not frantic, focused. And he'll be arrested publicly, she replied, if this sticks. Michael inhaled deeply. For 6 months, he said, voice low. I've been running, hiding, watching my wife grieve from a distance. He turned to me. I'm done hiding. I wasn't the woman who collapsed on the kitchen floor anymore. I would send it, I said. Fatima's fingers moved over the keyboard. One by one, encrypted channels opened. Files uploaded. Confirmation pings echoed softly in the quiet cabin. 30 seconds. That was when the final confirmation appeared. Fatima leaned back slowly. It's out. The silence afterward felt different, charged, anticipatory. We had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Within 2 hours, my phone buzzed. Not with threats this time, but with news alerts. Breaking. Federal investigation launched into Riverside Foundation. Whistleblower evidence suggests long-term financial corruption and suspicious deaths. My hands trembled, not from fear, from validation. They weren't untouchable. Michael exhaled slowly beside me. This is bigger than us now, he said. Yes, I replied. For the first time since that impossible phone call, I didn't feel like we were running. I felt like we had stepped into the light, and there was no going back into the shadows. The arrest began at 6:12 a.m. We watched it happen live from the cabin. Helicopter footage, flashing lights, federal agents swarming the glass headquarters of Riverside Foundation. Executives escorted out in handcuffs, cameras everywhere. Michael stood very still beside me. Then the screen shifted. Roger Blackwood. He was walking down the front steps of his house, the house where Michael grew up, where we'd spent Christmas dinners, where he once taught me how to carve a turkey properly because presentation matters. Agents met him at the bottom of the stairs. He didn't resist. He didn't look shocked. He looked annoyed. The reporter's voice cut through the cold air. Roger Blackwood, longtime trustee of Riverside Foundation, is now facing charges related to financial conspiracy and multiple staged vehicular homicides. Multiple. Not just Michael. My throat tightened. As agents secured him, he glanced toward the cameras. For half a second, his expression shifted. Not fear, not regret, calculation. And then he was placed in the back of the vehicle. Michael's breathing grew shallow. That was my father, he said quietly. No, I replied. That was your handler. The distinction mattered. News coverage exploded across every channel. The files we'd sent were corroborated by financial audits within hours. Other mechanics stepped forward anonymously. Former city employees leaked additional information. The narrative shifted fast. What had been dismissed as isolated accidents now formed a pattern. Brake failures, engine fires, drunk drivers. Suddenly, families were asking questions. By afternoon, the FBI announced a broader task force investigation. Fatima closed the laptop slowly. This won't end quickly, she said. But it's irreversible now. Irreversible. That word should have frightened me. Instead, it felt like justice beginning to breathe. Later that evening, a video call notification appeared on the secure system. Fatima froze. Unknown source, she murmured. Michael looked at me. Could be bait. Or leverage, I said. Fatima routed it through layers of protection before allowing the connection. The screen flickered. An older woman appeared. Silver hair. Sharp eyes. She studied Michael's face with an intensity that made my chest tighten. David? She whispered. Michael went still. Fatima leaned forward. Identify yourself. The woman straightened. My name is Linda Morrison, Michael's biological mother. Alive. She spoke calmly, though emotion trembled beneath it. I've been in witness protection for 28 years, she said. Your father and I uncovered Riverside's original laundering network. They killed him. They staged our accident. I was extracted hours before it happened. Michael couldn't speak. They told me my son was dead, she continued. Today, I saw your face on a secure alert. Silence filled the cabin. You survived, she said softly. So did you, he managed. The conversation was brief. Secure protocols limited time. But before disconnecting, she said something that settled into my bones. They thrive on silence, she said. You broke it. After the call ended, Michael sat down heavily. I moved beside him, resting my hand on his back. He had lost a father, regained a mother, lost his life, regained himself. Outside, the snow continued falling quietly. By the end of the week, indictments expanded, corrupt officers suspended, medical examiner's office under federal review, and Roger attempted to negotiate immunity. The news anchor's voice was steady. Sources say Blackwood is offering testimony in exchange for reduced sentencing. Michael exhaled slowly. He'll save himself, he said. Maybe, I replied, but he can't rewrite what he did. The truth was out, and truth, once exposed, doesn't retreat easily. But fallout has layers. That night, I watched a small local memorial service online. Lisa stood at a podium in a church hall, a framed photo of Michael beside her. She believed he was dead. She believed I was broken, but surviving. Tears streamed down her face as she said, "My sister has been so strong." My chest shattered quietly. Michael reached for my hand. "I'm sorry," he whispered. I shook my head. No, we saved lives. But saving lives doesn't erase the cost. The world believed my husband died in October. Now the world believed he was a whistleblower murdered for uncovering corruption. Only we knew the full truth. And as I closed the laptop, I understood something clearly. Justice had begun. But our old lives were still gone, and we would never step back into them the same way again. 6 months ago, I stood in front of a grave with numb hands and a hollow chest. I thought my story had ended there. Grief has a way of convincing you that what you lost defines the rest of your life. That you become the widow, the woman people lower their voices around. The one who survives, but never quite lives the same way again. What I didn't know then was that loss was only the first layer of truth. Michael and I didn't return to our old house. We didn't reclaim our old names. We didn't explain ourselves to the people we loved. Not yet. Federal protection protocols moved quickly once indictments stacked high enough. Quiet arrangements were made. Select individuals were informed under sealed agreements. Lisa was one of them. The call where she learned Michael was alive and that I had known was the hardest conversation of my life. She cried, she screamed. Then she said something that will stay with me forever. I'd rather have you alive and far away than buried and close. Love adapts. Roger's trial unfolded slowly. Evidence overwhelming. Audio undeniable. He never looked at the camera again. Never looked like a father. Just a man exposed. Michael met his biological mother in person 3 months later under secure supervision. I watched from a distance as she touched his face like she was confirming he wasn't another illusion. There are wounds that don't close cleanly, but they don't have to define you either. We built something quieter, smaller, honest. We work now at an independent bookstore in a town that doesn't know our history. We stock shelves, recommend novels, brew coffee for strangers. Sometimes, when the shop is empty, Michael leans against the counter and says, "Make it good." And I smile, because I used to dial his voicemail just to hear that phrase. Now I hear it every morning. If you had told me a year ago that my husband would die, come back, expose a conspiracy, and force me to leave everything familiar behind, I would have said that only happens in stories. But here's what I've learned. Love isn't proven in comfort. It's proven in truth. In standing side by side when everything collapses. In choosing each other, not because it's easy, but because it's real. I don't romanticize what happened. We lost friends. We lost routine. We lost innocence. But we didn't lose each other. And sometimes that is enough. 6 months ago, I thought I had lost everything. Turns out, I had only lost the version of life that kept me small. The one I live now, it's complicated. It's imperfect. It's watchful. But it's alive. And when you've once stood at a grave, believing your heart was buried with the man you loved, alive is a miracle.